Welcome. It is December 6th, 2020. It is the first Sunday of December, and so a lot of us are looking forward to Christmas. It is a season we call Advent. But how in the world are we supposed to celebrate Advent now? With all that's going on, what does this mean for Christmas? I'd like to take this morning and explore the Christmas story and maybe look at it in a new light. So let's begin with what is Advent. Advent is the arrival of something long waited for. So this could be any number of things, but most often it refers to December 25th. We spend all year waiting for this date, and especially the last month leading up to it. The church historically has recognized the 4 Sundays leading up to December 25th as Advent Sundays. But this year, everything is different. None of the normal traditions can happen. People aren't going home to see family. You can't gather together to celebrate. And it seems to be putting a damper on Christmas. But I think the reason that is culturally, we have misconstrued Christmas to mean something that it's not. As part of Christmas, we decorate the house. You put a tree up, you put lights and ornaments on it, and you gather everyone possible together in one house so you can all have a giant meal full of amazing dishes that you wouldn't normally do. All the specialty foods come out around Christmas. And what seems to be at the center of all the celebrations is an exchange of gifts, a giving and receiving of presents. And largely, this is what society says Christmas is all about. It's about gathering your family together, enjoying good food, and giving and receiving presents. But I think when you distill all of that down, what Christmas is about is just a celebration of good fortune. For the vast majority of people, that's all Christmas means. If you're fortunate enough to have a big family, then you gather them together and you join as one big family to celebrate that good fortune of having a large family. If you have wealth, then you celebrate that good fortune and that wealth by giving lavish gifts and receiving lavish gifts. If you have a nice home, then you celebrate that good fortune by decking the halls. Garland and lights and ornaments everywhere. And it all points to this celebration of good fortune. So, if you're not fortunate, then celebrating Christmas somehow seems wrong. And when other people are so excited about Christmas and they have that holiday cheer, it almost seems bothersome to be around them if you experience misfortune. If a loved one dies around the holiday season, or maybe this is the first holiday season without them. Christmas doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem appropriate to celebrate. Because instead of fortune, you have misfortune. And when you don't have the money to buy Christmas presents. Christmas can be very stressful. It can be, instead of a joyous time of year, a very dreaded time of year. Because Christmas means an obligation to spend money you don't have, to give gifts to people who may or may not even like those gifts. And that comes from this cultural understanding of Christmas is a celebration of good fortune. But that's not what Christmas is about. Christmas is about so much more. But I think in all the hustle and the bustle, Christmas gets missed. I think if we're going to celebrate Christmas this year, we have to return to the original Christmas. I'd like to read the Christmas story from Luke 2. It's a very familiar passage to a lot of us. But I think it's helpful to go back to the source. Luke chapter 2. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, everyone to his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was, that while they were there, in the days were accomplished, that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And lo, an angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angels a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men. And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into the heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which has come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph, and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad and sayings which told them concerning this child. And all that had heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, as it was told unto them. So this very first Christmas, where Jesus was born as a baby, looks a lot different than the Christmas we're now missing out on in 2020. There wasn't the big family meals and the presents and the lavishness and the opulence of the holiday season. But in fact, it was rather ordinary. See, Mary and Joseph, it said in verse 7 that there was no room for them in the inn, so they laid the baby in a manger. Now, some scholars disagree about what that meant, whether or not Jesus was actually born in a barn, like stable, like we think of when we think of barn, or if because the Palestinian kind of people often often lived with their animals if it was more just the main floor of a peasant's home, and the manger being a hole in the dirt floor where they would put hay for their animals to eat. Either way, it's clear that there is no lavishness about this night. When Jesus was born, it was ordinary, lowly, and humble. In fact, he was the king. He says, a Messiah has come. The angels proclaim that a king has been born. But he wasn't born in the palace. The wise men went to the palace first, looking for a king, and didn't find him there, but instead found him in little old Bethlehem, a very ordinary city, in an ordinary home or stable among the animals and the peasants. See, Jesus didn't come for the high and the mighty, for the opulence and the lavishness of a king, even though he deserved that. He came for everyone, and especially for the lowly and the humble. It's also interesting, the very first people who are told of this great arrival of a king. Shepherds. Not scribes or Pharisees or Herod or even any of the ruling class, but shepherds. Now, shepherding was not a glamorous profession. It was very dirty work, and it took a certain kind of person to be willing to be a shepherd. And so it's fascinating that God chooses shepherds to be the first guests of honor to meet this new king. Because that is who Jesus came for. He came for the humble and the lowly. You see, God sent his son to be a very different kind of king. Not a king of lavish parties and opulence, but a servant king. And Jesus so humbled himself that he took on the form of us. In Philippians 2, chapter 7, it says, "But made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself, and became obedient unto death, even death on the cross." So, as we look at Christmas 2020, I know it's disappointing that a lot of the things we're used to probably won't happen as normal. But I think this year provides the perfect opportunity to maybe think about Christmas traditions differently. What if this year we start some new traditions? We're already a week into December, and Christmas is right around the corner, but there's still time to start a few new traditions this year. And why don't we make these traditions in line with the original intent of Christmas? Because Christmas was never meant to be a celebration of good fortune, but hope for the lowly and the forgotten. If we look a little more at the context of the Christmas story, it comes after 400 years where the Jewish people hadn't heard from God. There was Malachi, the last prophet in the Old Testament. And then there's a span of 400 years where there are no more prophets of God until Jesus. And so this birth of a Messiah was the breaking of a 400-year silence from God. God telling his people that he had not forgotten them. That he is coming again, but not in the way that most people expected. Most Jews expected a conquering king to ride in on horseback and defeat their foes. And what they received instead was the meekest and humblest thing possible, a newborn baby. And in that form, Jesus provides hope, not only for the well-off and the people who have it all together, but for everyone, starting at the very lowest of the low. Those shepherds and people who don't even have a room to stay in. And so as we think about creating new traditions, how can we take this message of hope for the lowly and the forgotten and share it with those around us? Recently, I've been looking into something called Advent conspiracy. It was started several years ago, and it grew out of this dissatisfaction with Christmas as we typically celebrate it, centered around consumerism and gifts and materialism. And it said, what if we do away with these big lavish gifts and instead we focus our energies on things that matter more, like meeting the needs of the hungry and the thirsty and the orphans and the widows? And what if we show love to our family and our friends, not with the amount of money we spend or the amount of debt we accumulate, but instead by the amount of time we spend with them, in the intentionality of what we do with that time? So I'd encourage you to look into Advent conspiracy as you brainstorm new traditions for Christmas this year. I think you'll find a lot of helpful resources on things that we could do that better show the true meaning of Christmas.